Polls.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. And we thank you for being here, Barnaby.
Many sellers, especially if it's their first time, they think signing that initial contract, that letter of intent maybe, is the finish line. They kind of mentally check out, start planning the vacation, thinking the tough part's done. Not quite. Today, we are doing a deep dive into due diligence. We often call it the crucial and sometimes terrifying middle act of any big property sale. This is really the phase that decides if you actually close or if the whole thing just fizzles out.
Yeah, absolutely. So our mission today, for you listening, is to really decode what happens after the ink dries on that contract. Think of this phase, due diligence or DD, as the buyer doing an incredibly thorough background check on your property. We want to cut through the jargon, the complexity, and show you how being prepared can turn this stressful period from feeling like an interrogation into just verification.
I like the movie analogy you mentioned earlier. If the whole deal is a movie, then DD is that long montage sequence, right? You see the buyer hunched over stacks of files, inspectors walking around with clipboards.
Whispering to their lender about the plumbing.
Yeah. Exactly, and the goal is simple, but it feels ruthless.
Yeah.
Make absolutely sure that what you promised on paper, the income, the condition, actually matches what's real on the ground.
Precisely. Due diligence is where the buyer digs into every number, every single promise you made, the state of the infrastructure, everything. And it's important for sellers to get this. The buyer's mindset is purely defensive. They're protecting a huge investment. They're trying to de-risk it. It's not personal. They're not trying to insult you. But if you're disorganized, if you're unprepared, it will feel like an interrogation. Being organized, being transparent, those are your best tools, builds that crucial buyer confidence.
And confidence keeps the deal moving, doesn't it? Our sources often talk about this whole sale process like a three-act structure.
Yeah.
So act one, contract signed, maybe after some back and forth on price, and boom, the DD clock starts ticking. Usually, 30 to 90 days?
Typically, yeah.
Yeah.
Depends on the complexity, but that's a common range.
Okay, then act two, the inspection phase. That's our focus today. The deep dive into documents, financials, leases, utilities, physical checks. This is where you, the seller, spend weeks answering questions, digging up old papers.
And then finally, Act 3, the close. That's the finish line we all want. Lender gives the final nod, title's clear, insurance is sorted, you sign the final papers. But here's the critical insight, the thing every seller needs tattooed on their brain maybe. Surprises in Act 2 or delays creeping into Act 3. That's what kills deals. Like the source material says, and it's so true. A deal dies by 1,000 unreturned emails, not by one big problem. It's the silence, the feeling of chaos, the missing document that just drains all the momentum.
That makes total sense. If a buyer has to wait 2 weeks just for a copy of a water bill, they start wondering what else is wrong.
Exactly. Perceived chaos equals perceived risk. Big time.
Okay, so let's unpack this. How do smart sellers avoid giving the buyer that excuse to panic? Let's talk about preparation. Because if DD is the test, then solid prep is like your insurance policy against drama, against delays, and especially against those dreaded retrades, last-minute price cuts.
100%. The really smart seller has that list of essential documents, the essentials list, ready before the buyer even asks. It's not just about having the paperwork. It's a preemptive strike. It screams, I'm organized, I've got nothing to hide. Instantly shifts the leverage.
Okay, walk us through it. What are the absolute must-haves on that list? What's the first thing their analyst is going to ask for?
Okay, number one, without a doubt, financials. That means the last 2, ideally 3 years of verified profit and loss statements in your P&Ls, plus your current rent roll, detailed, and the bank statements that back it all up. Proof the money actually came in. Second, you need proof of payment history and sort of the tenant quality baseline. So tax records, federal, state, property, and copies of every lease, tenant applications if you have them, and clear records of security deposits held.
Quick question there. What if I'm a smaller operator? Maybe I track income in Excel, expenses in my checkbook. Is that going to fly, or do they need like CPA level stuff?
They'll expect something verifiable, an informal spreadsheet. That's often a red flag. Best practice, work with your CPA before you even list.
Yeah.
Get those P&Ls cleaned up, summarized, something auditable. It pays off massively.
Got it. Okay, what else on the essentials list?
Right, moving on. Meticulous documentation for how the property actually functions. Utilities are huge. Water, sewer, gas, electric, you need records. And crucially, clarity on who pays what. Tenants, owner. That's a major variable in the operating expenses.
And the physical history. I know maintenance logs often feel like a chore sellers skip.
Oh, but they're so important. Detailed logs for road repairs, water leak history, any sewer backups, pest control treatments. These aren't just records. They show the buyer you've been on top of things, that you haven't let deferred maintenance just pile up silently for years. Proves you're a responsible owner. And lastly, the legal and compliance stuff. All your permits, operating licenses, current insurance policies, any history of past claims, title reports, surveys you have.
Okay, so the big takeaway here for you, the seller listening. The cleaner, the more organized your paperwork is from the get-go, the faster that buyer trusts you. And the less they feel they need to dig around looking for problems you didn't mention, you control the story.
Couldn't have said it better. Because the core driver, remember, of this whole Act 2 is the buyer trying to justify the price they already agreed to. Or, if they find things during verification, they might look for a reason to ask for a price reduction.
Right, so we've handed over this mountain of documents, hopefully well organized. Where do they start digging first, looking for those potential price adjustments? Our sources point to 4 main areas of risk they scrutinize. Can you walk us through those? What are they really looking for beyond just the top-line numbers?
Sure. Their review is pretty surgical. First area, financial and tax review. They are cross-referencing your rent roll income against your actual bank deposit records. This is critical. Checks for inflated occupancy claims. They also sanity check your expenses. Like, is your lawn care expense line 4 times what it should be? They might suspect you're hiding a personal expense in there.
The infamous boat payment hidden in the books.
Exactly that kind of thing. They look closely at utility bills, too. Spikes in water usage might signal hidden leaks, unexpected sewer fees. Gotta understand why. It all eats into profit.
Wow, that detailed. It really sounds like they're trying to rebuild your financials from the ground up. What about the legal side?
Second area, legal and compliance. They'll review leases for weird clauses, hidden concessions, early termination options. They're hunting for liens against the property, any open code violations, past or present lawsuits, and, super critical, is the property's current use actually legal? This often involves checking if it's properly grandfathered.
Okay, explain that for our listeners. What does grandfathered mean here?
It means the way you're using the property now, say, as a mobile home park, is allowed to continue even if current zoning laws have changed and wouldn't permit a new park today. If a buyer discovers the property isn't legally grandfathered or the proof is shaky, that's a massive liability bomb. Could kill the deal right there.
Huge risk. Okay, third area, physical infrastructure. This is where the inspectors come in, boots on the ground.
It really is. This is the hands-on check of the roads, the electrical pedestals and wiring, the water lines, and, like we touched on, the sewage system. Is it reliable city sewer and water? Or are you dealing with aging septic tanks, maybe a lagoon system? The cost difference and risk profile there, immense. It can absolutely make or break a deal. This physical review phase almost always triggers the need for a Phase I environmental report too. Checks for historical contamination risks on the site.
Makes sense. And the fourth area, operational and human factors.
Right. This is about assessing your actual day-to-day. How do you collect rent? Are there management contracts in place? What are the real occupancy trends lately? And, importantly, what's the quality and stability of the tenants they're inheriting? If your rent collections suddenly dip right in the middle of DID, that's a huge red flag for a buyer. What's fascinating here is, you have to remember, due diligence. Fundamentally, it's not personal. It really boils down to math and liability assessment. Ultimately, the buyer's lender is also doing their own verification. They need to confirm that the property's actual net operating income, NOI, that's your true profit after operating expenses, can actually support the loan they're about to issue. If that verified NOI number drops because of hidden costs or risks found in DD, you can bet the bank or the buyer or both are going to push for a price adjustment. It's just business logic.
Okay, let's flip this around. We've talked a lot about the buyer's perspective. What about the seller's role during this intense period? You need to be transparent, clearly. But you also have to protect your own business, your own information. You disclose what's material, but you don't just open the floodgates on everything. Remember that phrase. Disclosure isn't confession, it's documentation.
That's a great way to put it. The seller absolutely has clear responsibilities. You must provide reasonable access to the documents, to the property for inspections, and crucially, you have to maintain normal business operations right up until closing. Keep collecting rent like usual, keep fixing things that break, don't let the place slide. You also have to cooperate reasonably with the buyer's appraisal, their surveyor, lender requests. That's part of the deal.
But boundaries are important too, right? Cooperate, yes. Surrender control, no. Where do sellers draw the line? What are the key protections?
You have very clear rights and boundaries you need to enforce, politely but firmly. You can and should limit physical inspections to reasonable business hours, reasonable days. You absolutely can require proof of insurance from any inspector or vendor the buyer sends onto your property. You don't want their inspector tripping and creating a liability for you. And very importantly, you can and should redact highly sensitive personal information. Things like tenant social security numbers, maybe financial details from other unrelated deals. Cooperation is professional, not reckless abandonment of privacy.
This careful dance, this back and forth, it often leads us straight into what the industry calls the retrade zone. Let's define that clearly for everyone. This isn't starting negotiations over. It's when the buyer comes back, usually late in the D&D period, and says, okay, based on what we verified, we need to adjust the price downwards. It typically happens if your actual expenses turned out way higher than you initially suggested, or if occupancy dropped noticeably since you signed the contract.
Or if that deferred maintenance is much worse, much more expensive than anticipated. Or if a big environmental or legal risk pops up unexpectedly. And it's really critical here to understand the nuance. Some retrades, they're arguably fair adjustments. If the buyer finds, say, the main sewer line has collapsed and needs a $50,000 repair you didn't disclose, a price adjustment discussion is probably warranted. It genuinely changes the asset's value. But other retrades are purely tactical. Some aggressive buyers use it as a leverage play late in the game, hoping you're too committed, too tired, too close to closing to push back hard.
So what's the seller's best defense against those purely tactical, maybe unfair retrade attempts?
It circles right back to where we started. Preparation. Killer preparation. Super clean books from day one. Honest, proactive disclosures up front. Because facts are your shield. If they try to demand a $20,000 discount for a roof issue you already clearly disclosed and documented repairs for, you have the high ground to say no. Chaos and disorganization. That's what lets the aggressive tactics win. Cleanliness gives you leverage.
Okay, so pulling this all together, what does this mean practically for a seller who's about to head into due diligence? Let's boil down the wisdom from sellers who navigate this well.
All right, practical lesson number one. Start organizing your documents the minute you decide to list, not when you get an offer. Buyers sniff out chaos immediately. Number two, stay responsive. Communicate. Remember, silence kills deals faster than bad news. Even if the news isn't great, getting it out there proactively is better than letting the buyer chase you. I knew a seller nearly lost a multi-million-dollar deal because they waited 4 weeks for one city permit copy. 4 weeks. Momentum died.
That's painful. And proactively fixing the small stuff helps too, right? Before their inspector flags it, like fix those potholes, replace that one broken electrical box, get that missing lease amendment signed. Easy wins that build huge confidence for not much cost.
Massive confidence builders. Also, manage the timeline smartly. Negotiate a fair DD window up front. Too short. Buyer panics. Maybe hires expensive rush inspectors finding phantom problems. Too long. Deal drifts. Buyer gets cold feet or finds more nits to pick. And goes without saying maybe, but stay honest. The truth always comes out in DD. Always. Better it comes from you framed properly than discovered by them.
Good point. Also, keep running the property strong through DD. Don't let collections dip. Buyers see that and think the operation is failing or you've mentally checked out. Big red flag. And get a good team. Your broker, your attorney, your CPA, they're like your pit crew in this race. Lean on their expertise. And maybe the last mindset piece. Don't automatically overreact if they do come back asking for an adjustment. A renegotiation request means the deal is evolving, yes, but it doesn't automatically mean it's dead. See what the facts are.
Exactly. And then finally, that magic moment. The buyer's lender gives the final clear to close. The deal shifts gear from inspection to execution. The last steps are usually pretty quick then. Final title check confirms it's clean, buyer locks in their insurance, everyone signs the mountain of closing docs, funds get wired, keys and files change hands. Done. So you see, due diligence isn't meant to be punishment. It's proof. It's actually the seller's biggest opportunity to professionally demonstrate, yes, I ran a clean, solid, viable operation, and that professionalism, that proof, that's your most powerful asset when you get to that closing table. It ensures you get the value you deserve.
Absolutely. And that reputation, being known as a seller who is prepared, who is professional, that's incredibly valuable in the market. It can often shield you completely from those tactical retrade games. So here's a final thought for you to chew on. Next time you're thinking about selling or even just assessing your own property, think about what one thing, maybe it's an old lease you never updated, maybe it's that septic system you haven't documented well. What could be your biggest hidden liability? And then think about how fixing that or documenting it properly now, proactively, how that simple act compels respect, maintains your leverage, and smooths the path with any future buyer. That preparation, that's where the real value lies.